For years, people whispered, they speculated, they debated what really went on behind the bright smile of the gospel queen, Sinach. Her songs touched hearts across the world, from churches to stadiums. She wrote the kind of songs that made people cry, worship, and believe again. But behind that powerful voice and the glow of success, something was hidden. You won't believe there was a secret she carried for years, a truth that would one day shock everyone who ever sang her songs. Let me tell you, Sinach was not just a singer, she was a symbol of faith and perfection. Every time she stood on a stage, people saw strength. Every time she sang Waymaker, they saw a woman full of unshakable belief. But here is the shocking part. The woman they saw was not the woman she truly was inside. Behind the smiles and the lights, Sinach was quietly fighting battles no one could see. The same songs that brought peace to others were written from her own pain. This is where it gets interesting, because her silence was not just about privacy, it was protection. What makes this story different is that it is not about fame or money. It is about the heavy cost of carrying a perfect image in front of millions. People around her saw success, but they didn't see the pressure. They didn't see the long nights, the tears that fell after the lights went off, or the loneliness that followed after the applause. She once said in an interview that even though the world celebrated her voice, she often felt unheard. The more she sang about hope, the more she felt her own hope slipping away. The craziest part was that Sinach couldn't even show her pain. She felt like the world had turned her into an image she couldn't escape. Every song had to be powerful, every word had to sound holy, every appearance had to look perfect. She was no longer just Sinach, she was the example, the woman who had to always be right, always be strong. People saw her as a symbol, not as a person. But destiny took an unexpected turn when she began to realize that the image she had built for others was slowly destroying the real her. She started to question everything. Why did she have to be perfect? Why did she have to hide her tears just to prove her faith was strong? The truth was, she had spent years healing others through her songs, but no one ever noticed that she herself was breaking. And the more famous she became, the more she felt trapped inside the cage of perfection. She once told a close friend, "People love my songs, but they don't know my story." And that story was filled with long seasons of silence, pain, and doubt. Behind every stage performance, there was a moment of weakness she couldn't show. Behind every loud cheer, there was a quiet voice in her heart asking, "Am I still enough?" She gave everything to her ministry, to her fans, to her message, but slowly she stopped giving time to herself. She became the face of faith, but she lost touch with her own feelings. That was the moment she realized that something had to change, and that change was coming soon, in a way no one expected. When Sinach began to step back from the spotlight, people started to talk. Her sudden quietness made the world wonder what was really going on behind the scenes. Fans noticed she wasn't appearing at events like before, interviews stopped, and even her social media posts became rare. You won't believe, rumors began to spread faster than ever. Some said she was going through personal issues, others whispered about trouble in her church circle, and a few even claimed she had lost her fire for God. But let me tell you, the truth was far deeper than anyone imagined. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was survival. She had spent years giving her best to the world, but in return, the world gave her expectations she could never escape. The more she tried to live up to that image of perfect faith, the emptier she began to feel inside. And here's the shocking part. She wasn't losing her faith, she was rediscovering it. Behind those closed doors, away from the spotlight, Sinach was trying to reconnect with the person she used to be before the fame, before the titles, before the pressure. This is where it gets interesting, because the very silence people criticize was actually the beginning of her healing. What makes this story different is that Most people hide their struggles forever, but Sinach decided to face hers head on. She admitted that there were times she stood on stage singing about joy while her heart was breaking. There were nights she prayed not for success, but for peace. And the craziest part was that even when she felt lost, she never stopped singing. Because deep down, she believed that her pain had a purpose. Destiny took an unexpected turn when she realized that her story, the tears, the loneliness, the struggle, might be the message people truly needed to hear. She started to understand that the gospel industry, like any other, could be cruel. People love your light, but they don't always want to see your darkness. When she took time off, some fans grew impatient, others turned their backs, but there were a few who stayed, who said, "We're praying for you." Those voices gave her strength. Let me tell you, Sinach wasn't disappearing. She was transforming. In her quietness, she began to hear something she hadn't heard in a long time: God's voice, softly reminding her that she was loved not for what she did, but for who she was. She later shared with a friend that the stage had started to feel like a lonely place. I would finish singing, smile, wave, and then go backstage and cry, she said. Everyone thought I was strong, but I was just tired. That confession broke hearts because it showed the human side of someone people thought was untouchable. But that pain became her teacher. It taught her that strength doesn't always look like smiling in public. Sometimes it looks like crying in private. As she slowly began to heal, she also began to see how dangerous perfection could be. It made her forget that even faith leaders are still human. She realized she had been serving from an empty place, giving and giving until she had nothing left for herself. So she made a brave decision to pause, to rest, and to let go of the image the world had built for her. And that decision changed everything, because what came next would not just shock her fans, it would completely change how the world saw her story. As Sinach took a step back, the world noticed, but what they didn't see was what was happening inside her. She spent long hours reflecting, praying, and trying to reconnect with herself. You won't believe, during that quiet time, she faced emotions she had been running from for years: doubt, fear, loneliness, and even moments where she questioned her calling. Let me tell you, it was not easy for someone who had always been seen as the unshakable voice of faith. This is where it gets interesting. The same woman whose songs brought hope to millions was now learning to face her own shadows. She confessed that even her greatest hits, songs that had become anthems for people worldwide, reminded her of how much pressure she had carried. Every time she sang "Waymaker" or "I Know Who I Am," she felt the weight of expectations pressing down. The craziest part was that while fans celebrated her voice, no one knew the tears behind those notes. She revealed that she often sang with a smile, but her heart was heavy with exhaustion and self-doubt. Destiny took an unexpected turn when she realized that the very music that healed others had sometimes hidden her own pain. What makes this story different is that she didn't just stop and rest. She began to change the way she thought about faith and ministry. She understood that vulnerability was not weakness. In fact, she started to see that being honest about her struggles was a form of worship. She began to rebuild her life, not around applause or recognition, but around truth, stillness, and peace. Let me tell you, it was a slow process. Some days were easier than others, but every step forward helped her reclaim the woman she had almost lost in the shadow of perfection. The pressure she had once felt to always be flawless started to fade. She learned that God didn't need her to be perfect. He only needed her to be real. Behind the closed doors of her home, away from the cameras and microphones, she allowed herself to cry, to pray without an audience, and to feel deeply again. But here is the shocking part. Even as she healed, the world around her kept expecting the same Sinach they had always admired. Every message, every song, every word was still under scrutiny. Yet she was no longer afraid to admit that she was human, and that human truth gave her a new kind of strength. She also faced criticism during this time. Some people accused her of stepping away because she was losing her touch. Others said she was no longer focused on her ministry. But Sinach didn't defend herself. Instead, she focused on what mattered most: her faith, her family, and her inner peace. You won't believe it was during these quiet, hidden years that she discovered her true purpose wasn't only in singing, but in living authentically. And in that authenticity, she found freedom, the kind of freedom she had longed to sing about, but never fully felt. As Sinach embraced this new season, she began to see the real power of her story. She realized that her struggles, her tears, and her quiet moments were just as important as her songs on stage. Let me tell you, the world had only ever seen her victories, but what she learned was that her vulnerability could be a greater gift than perfection. The craziest part was that her fans didn't turn away when they heard her truth. They came closer, inspired by the woman behind the music, the heart behind the hymns, and the courage behind her confession. She started to speak openly about her journey, sharing how fame, ministry, and expectations had tested her relationships, her faith, and her identity. Destiny took an unexpected turn when she realized that stepping away from the spotlight had not only saved her spirit, but had also allowed her to reconnect with God in ways she never had before. She confessed that sometimes the most important ministry was not in front of thousands of people, but in the quiet moments of reflection, prayer, and healing. What makes the story different is that Sinach didn't just survive her struggles, she transformed them into a message of hope for everyone who felt trapped by expectations. She explained how easy it is to become a brand in ministry, how fame can blur the line between serving God and serving applause. She said, "Fame will test what you truly believe. It will show whether you are serving God or serving the world." And let me tell you, those words carried the weight of someone who had walked through fire and emerged stronger, wiser, and freer. Even as she returned to performing, it was no longer about proving perfection. Each song, each note, each appearance was filled with honesty and heart. The world could now see her not just as a gospel icon, but as a human being who had faced her fears, accepted her pain, and turned it into purpose. The songs that once masked her struggles now reflected her truth. And here is the shocking part. Her confession and courage inspired thousands to embrace their own struggles, proving that even spiritual giants have moments of weakness and that strength often comes from admitting it. In the end, Sinach's story became more than a tale of music and fame. It became a story of human resilience, faith, and the courage to be real. You won't believe how her journey changed not just her life, but the lives of countless people who had followed her music for years. She had walked through the valleys, faced the darkness, and emerged into the light with a message stronger than any song. That truth, honesty, and vulnerability are not signs of weakness. They are signs of real power, real faith, and real freedom.